So we'll introduce our next speaker, who is Kavanagh Nangle, who has over 20 years' experience in accounting, finance and auditing, both in academia and industry. ACA qualified with CAI. After training with Deloitte, she's currently the academic head of accounting at Technological University Dublin. With 15 years of lecturing experience, Christine combines private and public sector roles in senior management. She's also a PhD candidate at DCU, researching professional skepticism, and serves on the executive committee of BAFA's Audit SIG Special Interest Group. She's authored the External Audit and Assurance Textbook for CAI in 2022. So please give a warm welcome, please, to Christine Kavanagh Nangle.
I would just like to say that I did contact my accounting friends and PJ has been removed from the building. At least on 2 occasions, he indicated that debits and credits were not important to accountants. And I would just like to clarify that that is complete and utter lie, blasphemy. Of course, debits and credits will always be important. So I just ask you to strike that from the video because we don't want that getting out. I'm left in conflict after PJ's delivery because I myself am in the middle of a PhD. And because I am an accountant, and I am bound by a code of ethics, leave that in, I will of course be taking the long route in doing my PhD. I will also be finding where PJ went to buy him a pint to figure out how, if I wanted to, just out of interest, do it in 2 weeks because I'm a bit busy at the moment and I could do without it. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about public-private partnership in education, which is a bit of a dirty word. Quality assurance, exam boards, student experience, and what it looks like in terms of the future. So public-private partnership in education is a bit of a contradiction because for any of you that are involved in education at the university sector and private or in public sector, it's a very unique little environment. We're very unusual in the way that we do things, and we don't really like the private way. But in meeting with PAT, I'm reminded that one of our pillars is in partnership. And it was definitely the human side of me that realized that I wanted to do business with PAT. But of course, the accountant with me then did do all the due diligence and double check that that was okay. But it is that human side of us that builds relationships. And the types of individuals that we met in both Jerry and in Andrew persuaded me that the ethos in PAT was one that I would want to be a part of, particularly because of the passion in respect of their students and the pastoral care that I knew that they would get. And from that very early meeting, we had a vision of a quality curriculum meeting national and international skills gaps that was accessible to all, which was no easy plight because we were 2 organizations coming together and people were afraid of that. A lot of my own academic team asked, well, why are we farming out education to somebody else? Why would we do that? Why would we put our seal on that? And that's because we each have very unique assets. We each had something to offer that if we brought together, we could reimagine, we could innovate, and we could present something that could be a little bit different. And within the university sector, we can be restrictive in making decisions because we're a little bit afraid of getting it wrong. And this just allowed me to look at things a little bit differently. In a public-private partnership with education, I guess, what does that mean? What are we doing? We provide the university accreditation, so the award comes from Technological University Dublin. But quite a lot of the teaching and the VLE environment is operated within PAT. And so I need to have complete confidence over what's being delivered. And that started with the curriculum, which took some time for us to agree upon. We did a validation document, and that had to go through the TU Dublin validation processes. So we went through some rigorous times guys would have said, and Sharon would reiterate, that Jerry spent way too much time with me in those weeks and months through due diligence and validation and so on. So it was rigorous. It had its pain points, but when we had it validated, we stood back and we looked at what we had created, and we were very pleased that it was what we wanted. When it comes to teaching and learning, again, why would a university hand over teaching to somebody else? Well, it wasn't so much handed over. What we imagined was something that had an academic spine that ensured the university academic rigor that we required, but that leveraged from industry experts. And we were starting in the area of fintech, which moves rapidly. And for those of us that are in education, it is very hard to keep up with everything that is happening on the ground in real time. And to give an example, when we released this first, it was when the war on Ukraine had just started and we had started to push the sanctions onto Russia. And our students were learning about what that meant in real time. What did putting sanctions on Russia actually mean in the finance industry? And so it was rich, it was real education, but with the academic rigor that it needed because it had an academic spine. So in some cases, the experts or the industry experts were delivering on just a single learning outcome. And that was synthesized, that learning is synthesized by the academic, pulled together into an exam paper. Of course, we needed diversity and inclusion. We needed to transcend borders because in our current educational system, because of the pen and paper, because of how we're structured, you've got to come to be educated, and we were rigorous in that. I think COVID gave us problems, of course, but it also presented opportunities to us. And we didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Once it was all over and we could return, we had to ask, well, what do we want to return to? What were the good parts of what we experienced and what can we keep? And some of what we experienced at that time, like Ian said, those students who need extra accommodations are rising every year, be it an individual room, a scribe, whatever it might be, those needs are rising and we cannot meet the demand of what they need. And so we needed to make sure we could do that. Also, geographical borders. We want to grow internationally. Ireland is seen as top class in education, but you've got to come to us to receive that, and we needed to take down those geographical borders so that we could open up our excellent education system to a greater audience. In terms of student support services, as I've said, one of the main reasons why I decided to embark on a relationship with PAT was because of the clear pastoral care that I could see my students would get. Fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of my students have my mobile number and call me at all different times, which will see me divorced very soon. But on the other hand, I think it's that makes education a little bit different. It's that human interaction that you know that somebody cares enough to pick up the phone when you're in trouble, or, and sometimes you think, now really, did you really need to call me about that? It's on the website, it's on whatever. But then sometimes it's something that you think that made a difference. That 2-minute phone call made a difference to them. And I knew that I got that with PAT. I knew that they shared that ethos, and that meant a huge amount to me. And then the dirty owl assessment and evaluation. The piece on the educational journey that every student hates, but it's a necessary evil. Myself and Andrew often, tick back and forth on it. And, when you get the bell curve that we're supposed to achieve, look, a student gets the grade that they get, but we need to also make sure that not everybody gets a distinction, because not everybody is exceptional. So we need to be able to class them to some degree as to, who are the top performers out there, because that's the passport that they worked for in order to get the job. But sometimes it does erode the journey and the learning experience. So we wanted to see how could we reimagine it to make sure that we got the best out of the assessment environment. And for a lot, traveling to a venue that sitting down with the pen, the big room, as Ian showed earlier on, that intimidation almost feels, loads of people around, people shuffling bags and all sorts. It can be an awkward environment in which to do an exam, and the stern-looking invigilators, I think we actually asked them to send us a photograph of themselves just to make sure they're stern enough looking, but I don't think I've ever seen an invigilator who went, oh, they look really nice. So I think it's a criteria that we incorporate. So what did that look like? One of the things that we really wanted when we assessed students was that it reflected the real world. And let's be honest, the pen just does not reflect the real world anymore. So having students sit down and try to write something in chronological order that makes sense isn't the real world in which they live. And they are going to have access to a laptop to do it, and they're not going to be asked to write a report and hand it in to their boss at the end of the day. It is going to be digital, and they are going to need to know how to navigate digital tools. In the real world, when somebody is asked to do something, they're not told, you do not use the internet, do not open a book, do not look at the standard. You use all of the tools available to you. Why wouldn't you? Because that allows you to research, to understand, to get the best possible answer for it. But of course, you aren't given 3 months to do it in the real world. Everything is time sensitive. And so should the exam be. And what we're doing is testing the student on not to regurgitate, can you remember? That doesn't really matter. And I think a lot of the exams that I did cram for, I forgot the next day. I was able to put it down on the paper that day, but following day, gone. Don't tell anybody that. Take that off the recording as well. What was richer was understanding, including the debits and credits. I still go back to debits and credits. I'm just going to harp on about that. If I need to solve a problem, T account, work it out, it's not going away. So open book, absolutely essential. Applied so that they not only can regurgitate, but they understand it in enough detail to be able to solve a problem with whatever tools they would have available to them in the real workplace. And so we've created a real work context. But we have the challenges of AI. We have the challenges of copy and paste. And so we have to consider then, well, then is it their work? And so to create that authentic assessment environment, it's live and recorded. So the student is recorded through the time that they're doing the exam, and there's also a live aspect to it as well. Now, within the recording, we have the option of turning on some of those AI tools that go, did you move your eyes and did you stand up and so on. But for us in these particular set of exams, we chose not to turn those on. Why? Because it was open book. So it was going to be very hard for them not to move the eyes without, so it was an unrealistic environment. But what it created was an opportunity to adapt to the different types of learning environment. If it had been closed book, we would have been expecting them to look at the screen and we could have turned that piece on. So it's about being able to adapt to the different cohorts. No copy and paste, of course, we can turn that on. That's a big one. And the students use it all the time. I mean, you have discussions. We know our students so well. I mean, within Technological University Dublin, we have small classroom sizes. And I don't know where in their head they think that we don't know them well enough to know that they can construct something that is grammatically perfect and sounds nothing like the student we see in the classroom every day by copying and pasting. But they will still try it. So there's no copy and paste functionality, which means even though they can interact with the website, they have to read, interpret, synthesize what they're seeing, and make sure they only take the relevant piece associated with the question. We can both prohibit and restrict. So restrict means you cut it off. So we could cut off ChatGPT, we could decide there's a certain site that they're not allowed to access, and we can choose to restrict their access. In these exams, we chose to prohibit because we're dealing with executive education, and it's a choice, isn't it? But we're telling you, do not use ChatGPT. We're telling you to act in the spirit in what we're trying to do. Of course, you have the choice to break the rules, but we can see you. And so we have an access log of everything that you accessed. And do we have an example of a student who decided, you know what, I think ChatGPT would be great for this? Of course we do. Were they caught? Yes, they were. Exam, null and void. But there's learning in that, isn't there? There's consequence to your actions. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to educate you on what's right and wrong as well. And and again, it's real world. It's a real world assessment. It's a real world exam. And then, of course, we have Turnitin for assessment as well, because not everything is done in the proctored environment. We still do continuous assessments where you have to submit an exam, and Turnitin is very good for identifying the different sources. The log of access also allows us to make sure that they're referencing properly, because we can see what you accessed, and we would expect to see those in the referencing tool. And of course, this environment creates better accessibility, both from a geographical point of view, but also those individuals that just can't get to an exam centre, the panic of missing the bus, of being in traffic. I know, similar to Ian, except I thought I had to be here for 9 o'clock, and I really would have been late. And I was ringing Jerry going, oh my God, but it was okay. I left my kids at McDonald's going, enjoy your breakfast, see you later, bye, take your brother to school. It was one of those moments, those poor parenting moments, as they say. But I'm sure they're fine. I'm sure they got there and they're perfectly okay. So we're taking away that stress because you're where you need to be. You're comfortable with it. And as Ian alluded to earlier on, it's something that you should have tried and tested on a number of occasions before you've ever come in. And all of that really satisfies the auditor in me, because I sign off on the exam board and I'm a bit difficult. And I know that Andrew's laughing. He doesn't always be laughing. Andrew's laughing. He's like, I do ask the difficult questions. I do put them on the spot because it's my signature on it, and that matters to me. And it's not just about the grade that they received, it's about that educational journey. I have to have confidence in every piece of the process. And if I do see, which we do in one of the particular programs that we run, we've got such a rich cohort that comes to it. They score really well. They're up there receiving distinctions. But I've got comfort that I know that they're real. So when I'm pulled in the university to go, what's this? Doesn't meet the bell curve, I'm still confident that they're a deserved grade. And I need to have that confidence before I'll put my name on the page. And there's been many an exam board I have pulled, to the absolute disgust of my colleagues. But we've got to get it right. It means a lot. There are people behind it. So earlier on, I said to you, one of our pillars was partnership. And people is the other one. And sometimes we forget as we're doing things and we're ticking boxes that there are real people behind all of this. That panic on the morning of an exam, that want to graduate, that have studied all night but had a sick child or whatever. We want to think about all of those factors and the fact that there are real people behind these systems that do exams and real lives that are impacted when we get it wrong. And for that reason, the student experience is really important. And I know Orla and the team did an incredible job making sure that it was communicated to students well in advance. They were given mini videos on this is what you are going to see. They were given access to the system to log in and get comfortable with it. So they knew what they were going to see. The lecturers themselves knew what they were going to see. They were trained on how to do it. And of course, like any system, we're just currently implementing Banner 9 for those of you in higher ed. It's a wonderful system. Testing is essential. Even in Banner 9, though, that testing might not always work. But being said, you still got to do it. So the system was rigorously tested and stood up to that testing. Everybody was trained. And of course, sometimes it falls down in any system that we do. And the feedback loop for that reason is extremely important. And our students have embraced it. We've got very good feedback on it. Does it suit absolutely everybody? It never will. Does the exam hall suit everybody? No, it never will. Will it replace the exam hall? And I think somebody was asking this earlier on. It doesn't have to. There's no reason why they can't work in unison. This works for our part-time cohort. For my first, second-year students, I want them on campus every day, because for young undergraduates, it's so much more than the academic education that they receive. It's also about learning what it is to be human and socialise and interact. And I think even the exam hall is an experience that teaches them something in the early years. But we do need to adapt and we do need to evolve, and it needs to be able to adapt in unison for different cohorts and different needs. The future, big red button on AI corrections, on the use of AI. I don't like my kids on social media. I loved the fact that when we went out to play when we were younger and you came home and you were upset about something, that we could close the door and that was it. And you were in the sanctity of your own home. That doesn't exist anymore, but I can't change that. All I can do is educate my children on how to use social media, how to responsibly use it. And the same is true of AI and AI correction. All I can do is embrace it. I can't close the doors of the university on its arrival because it's coming whether I like it or not. So instead, what I choose to do is embrace it. And the relationship with PAT has given me an excellent opportunity to be able to embrace it, to be able to dip my toe in and see what's working and what's not. And so AI correction, yeah, are we afraid of it? We're terrified. We are terrified of it, but what lecturer loves to correct? It is always the drudgery part of the job. I would lecture till the cows come home, but the correcting side of it kills me. So AI will bring us, yes, speed, absolutely. Consistency over a period of time, and it will remove the bias. But that's not without firstly testing that works. So chartered accountants have over time increased the accuracy rate of AI. And if we were to introduce it here, as we're looking to do within the fintech environment, it will be with dual correction as well, and seeing, well, what is the accuracy on either side? What are the pros and cons? What are we losing? So when we do introduce it, it will be done so responsibly, with the students' knowledge. Surprisingly, we were talking yesterday, Andrew, and students don't like the idea of it. Why? Because they say it's cheating. Like, we're not allowed to cheat, how come you can cheat? So we do have to communicate with them and get their feelings on it. And then compare and review and make sure that it works. With AI coming and us saying, the foundations are still so important. And I joke about debits and credits, but I do wonder how they will be able to get a report and understand whether it's right or wrong if they don't have the basics. We can't walk away from the basics. We can't stop educating on, agnostically about data, because you put crap in, you get crap out. So they have to understand that intrinsically they've got to understand within their own discipline what they're doing, because otherwise, whatever they receive, they will accept blindly. As I mentioned earlier on, I'm currently doing a PhD in the area of professional skepticism. So I'm looking at whether, in fact, there is growth in professional skepticism with a single cohort from the time they enter a contract to the time that they leave. When I did the initial one, so I'm doing what's referred to as a longitudinal study. So I measure it at the beginning and I measure it at the end, and I see is there growth. And then I do a series of interviews to see, well, what did the different students interact with? But something of interest to me when I was doing the initial survey was, well, the whole area of social media and the fact that there is a lot of research at the moment that would say that social media dulls our professional skepticism. And I would say the same of AI, because the more you use it, the less skeptical almost that you become, because it's automatically generating it for you. And I included that as a question within the survey that I did to the students. So I measured the professional skepticism, and then I collected a load of other data around it. It was stark, the difference between those that had high use of social media, very low skepticism. Low use of social media, very high skepticism. And so what that presents to us in education is a challenge to make sure that we reimagine how we teach, and that we do use critical skills, that we are looking to make them apply the knowledge. And to apply the knowledge, you've got to understand it. And so all it means is we can't shut the door, but we have to reimagine how we do it. And we have to bring out more of those human characteristics that the computer can never replicate. And that's all from me.
Thank you, Christine, for that. We're going to have some questions now as well, if anyone's any questions. But one for me, first of all, is that feedback from students. So what did they say to you? Had any of them actually been involved in traditional exams? Probably Leaving Cert.
So this was only as a result of a conference that actually Andrew was at. So he shared that fact with me yesterday when we were talking about how are we going to do it and so on. And Andrew was saying, interestingly, he was at conference yesterday, or was it last week in Bristol, or Gen AI? And what was one of the really interesting facts that came out of it was that students that were surveyed said, don't like it. I don't think you should be allowed to do it. I'm not allowed to use it. You shouldn't be allowed to use it.
This is for AI correction.
For AI correction.
Yeah. And in terms, though, of actually online assessment, though, how have students taken to that in terms of
really well?
Yeah.
Really well. I mean, we will always have a few that don't like it, but on the broad spectrum, we've got very good feedback. But a lot of that, as Ian said, is down to the team behind it. You have got to communicate, test, and make sure that it's up and running. You need to take the stress out of it. And you take the stress out of it by rigorous testing, making sure it's up on the day, and making sure the students know what they're going to see.
And just to add, just simple things like creating demo exams so they can go in and practice, so they're really familiar when they come into the exam and use it. And things just making sure everyone's on board properly, because obviously people use different browsers and stuff like that. Sorry, Jerry, thank you. So it is very much what Ian was talking about. A lot of it's in the prep, a lot of it's in the communication, a lot of it's getting them familiar to the environment. But I'd concur with Christine. We've had a very good experience generally, and with Cirrus in particular.
Yeah. And depending on what type of students that you interview, it will depend on all of that. So some people, if they've had a bad experience, will say, oh my God, absolutely not online, the stress of it, etc. But you can change that view if it's done right.
Any questions? I'll just give you the...
No, not in this environment, no. For part-time, and there's none of them that came to say, I don't want to do this, I want to do it on campus. Now, I do get it the other way around. And I get a huge amount of on-campus students. So in some of the other part-time programs we do, our reach has got bigger. And one of the drawbacks for the students is I make them attend for examinations. So we're looking to kind of roll this out a little bit further. And I don't see the exam hall going away. I do still have a small cohort of students that go, oh no, I just want to go in and know that I can do it there and so on. And I don't imagine that going away entirely, but it gives me an option of a hybrid.
Just add to that, just again, it's important to be clear, the partnership that Christine has just outlined, all our learners are part-time. The vast majority are working professionals. So I think the online environment, both from the classroom perspective and the exam, it works really well for them.
Yeah.
And it geographically spread as well. As I always joke, I think we've got 25 counties. We're still struggling with Leitrim, but we'll get one day.
One more question. Oh, there's somebody from Leitrim here. Did you have a question? No? Just did you mean to? Not yet, not yet. Any other questions? Christine will be joining us for our panel discussion after lunch. So if you have any more questions, we'll bring them up then. So thanks once more, Christine. A round of applause, please, for her.